Alright, so we're going to do the piston assembly. So we have a basic maintenance kit, and this kit right here will have all the different assembly pieces we need for replacements. So we have right here the new Teflon gaskets. There's 4 in this container. You can see what they look like. We also have a new set of O-rings. If you remember when we were doing the cleaning procedure, I was telling you about the small O-rings that you might find here as well as here. These would be those O-rings. Now obviously there's no groove for an O-ring, so you don't have to replace these. We typically do not throw these away, even though we have a ton of them, just because. So we're going to do the assembly real quick. So we start with the base, the new O-ring. You got to make sure it goes down there securely. You'll see that it's all the way down and it's not on any of the edges. We then take this cylinder, place it down, take another Teflon gasket, and in a similar fashion we assemble it over there. Once again, you can see that nothing's catching. Squeezing down so it doesn't dislodge. We'll set that down until it meets in the groove. You'll see that going left or right it doesn't move. Now then, next thing you want to do is rotate so the holes line up. There's only one orientation where they line up. And we put the screws in there. Just kind of do a little bit of an initial putting in. This has to be tightened down in a particular fashion, which we'll explain, and it has its own special tool. If you find that the screws are not lining up well, try rotating 90 degrees. And by this, I mean this entire top piece by 90 degrees. Just kind of going finger tight is fine. You don't need to use a tool for this part very much. So then what we have right here is basically, this is like a torque Allen wrench. It's designed with a groove right there on the left side. That lets you know once you've applied enough torque. So you'll notice when you start to need it, at least initially, they'll go in pretty easily rather. And it's only once you start to have a little bit of resistance that you'll want to start using this as a torque wrench. So the idea is you move it until it gets that point. Go to the next one. So this way we're applying a constant torque on these. So then once you've gone through and done the whole thing, go back and make sure that they are at the appropriate torque. Anything more than this will damage the assembly. Okay, so this is completely done. Now just a little note, you can see we can move this, the internal part of the piston up or down on this slide. It is lubricated, so when we're actually reinserting it into the pump itself, we do have some degrees of freedom to help things line up. All right? Okay, so we're now ready to put the pistons in alignment. Now the very first piston will be the left. You can tell because it's the one that has the furthest indentation. So basically it'll go in through here You'll notice the arrow pointing the direction toward you, and you'll slip it right here onto the okay, let's take this out first. Once again, it's been a little while, but typically this was put on early. As you can see, it'll just slide right on. Then we place a divider piece right on there, and then in a similar fashion we add the right side, also slides on, then another divider, then we're going to insert the weight. Just sits on there. Now this is when this tool comes into place. So set it through the weight hole. It's best if you try to take tension off it by touching the weight a little bit. So make sure that we're in there well. Okay. So basically what we've done here is we are aligning the weight more than anything with this. And then what we want to do is put on the washer, and then the nut. The nut has kind of been used both directions, so not really sure which. It does have the groove, so this is the top. So we're trying to do this in a way where we have put the weight at a particular orientation. That's the purpose of this tool. So the next thing we do now is tighten this entire assembly down. Okay. So when this is not lubricated, this can be really stiff. So that's why we kind of have this guy around, or even if it is lubricated. And this should help us untighten it. Comes out just like that. So now this assembly is complete until we're now ready in just a moment to start putting on these pieces as well as their respective metal gaskets, and then putting on the tops, and we'll all do that next. Alright, so now we're going to put the rest of the assembly together. So one of the first things we want to do is make sure we get out our O-rings. There are 5 of them. I'm going to kind of hold them up together like this, and we're looking for the short one. The short one goes in a different position, and it's this guy is a little thicker. That's how you find it, shorter and thicker. And this will go in the front here. 2 of these will need each one for the top block. First one in. Sometimes they have a tendency to want to pop out. Just like that one. Maybe we're using this one. Okay. We can worry about the top part later. So this is the right side. So you first kind of put it on at an angle like this. Just kind of work it. There it goes. And now we'll kind of let it descend a little bit. And we want to see kind of where it, as we put a little bit of pressure, where it kind of starts to go once it lines up. So you can see it's kind of torqued a little bit. So I want to try to turn it just slightly. Kind of find a groove for it. Now at this point we could grab our shims, set them right there. So they do have the holes in them, so we'll need to make sure that we line that up. Now the first thing we want to do is we want to take this block and tighten it against the base. So a trick to doing that is to grab the top piece, and our screws. Remember that the whole thing has to line up all the way through. So if anything catches, it'll just be a tiny bit. That's all we need at first. Alright, so now that these have all caught, we want to start bringing it down. So you can see there's a big gap here. What we'll start doing is, we have one that really hasn't caught. Okay, there it goes. Yes, alright, we got them all now. So we're going to start to bring them down just a little bit at a time. You don't have any one side too far out of whack at a point. This whole thing could be brought down by direct force, but this is just a lot easier to do, more controlled. So I'm continually alternating which one I'm screwing, if you can see that. Okay, so we have effectively sandwiched all that together, and now that we've done that, we're going to set this on its side. We're going to put on the other side. Actually, since we have this position, you know what, we're going to undo this. We'll just take care of it now rather than do it in a separate step process. We're going to take off the top. And we're going to put on the valve and finish this assembly. Now the other side will basically work just the same as this. Once you do this method, you know this method, you'll know it for the other side. So I don't believe that we're going to show you the video of this full procedure for the other side too, but we'll let you know if there's any idiosyncrasies. Alright, so this whole thing comes out, and this is still flat, which is what's important. So we grab our clean, high pressure, high vacuum valve, and we want to kind of just line it up in the center. And we take the rubber hose gasket basically, and just kind of set it in there, and an O-ring. Okay. So for this right side, there's edges here and the back side is flat. We want the edge side. So now as long as this guy goes down nice and carefully. Now also another indicator, you can see where there's been some markings here with a Sharpie. That's kind of also a guideline letting you know which side lines up with which. Now sometimes the hole positions can slip a little bit, but typically they're pretty decent. That's because the metal gaskets on the bottom can sometimes slip just a little bit. So then once they're basically all kind of just a little tight, start taking them around, tighten them down just a little bit each, keep going around in the circle. Bring a little more pressure each time. And that is how we put that piece together. So for the other side, we'll just put it on its side. And continue this procedure. The only caveat is the orientation here will have this gas ballast piece parallel with the pump in this orientation. Beyond that, everything else is almost exactly the same for this left piston. Alright, so as you can see, we have both pistons in place. You'll notice right here we have those Sharpie notches, little marks, kind of give you a little bit of feedback as to how they're oriented. It's always a good idea to take a mental note of how it looks before you take it apart. So we're now ready to put on the faceplate. So we have our nice, thicker, smaller O-ring, and we'll just insert it right here, just as before. And just carefully put it up against this. Want to make sure that we don't dislodge the O-ring. Want to make sure that we keep a little bit of pressure against the plate, so we can get at least one on either side of these in and applying tension so we don't dislodge the O-ring. So at this point the O-ring is not going to fall out and we can take our time adding the other screws. And now we'll make sure we go through and do a full tight. So we have only one more thing to do, and we need to screw on the gas ballast control right here. So this is typically a Phillips. All right, and there we go. We now have ourselves a completely rebuilt Pfeiffer vacuum pump. The next thing to do is to put a volume on this, plug it in, turn it on, and watch it pump down. Thank you very much, and I hope this helped.